Well, folks, from time to time, I take a detour in the show here and try to bring on a guest that's got some great experiences and real impactful stories to share with us. And today, I think, is one of those days. So we are going to dive right in.
You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Leadership Powered by Common Sense. My name is Doug Thorpe, and I'm going to be your host and tour guide. And today, like I said, we're going to be exploring some lessons learned in the trenches. I always love that story. There's no value like proven experience. My guest is a gentleman named Tom Kereszti. He is a proven Fortune 500 CEO. I'm going to let him describe some of that. But first, Tom, welcome to the show.
Doug, thanks so much for having me.
You and I share one common thread, and probably some others that we haven't even talked about yet. We're both John Maxwell guys. We subscribe to a lot of his teaching and learnings. And how long have you been following Maxwell?
I met John in 2002. He is now, I used to have a house in Palm Beach Gardens down in Florida. And John at that time was an occasional guest speaker at this church called Christ Fellowship.
Yeah.
That's where I first met him I think it was about maybe January or February of 2002. He had just launched his book, Today Matters. It's kind of a funny story. We kind of go off on a tangent to all my stories because I got all these stories, but we had bought a house, Kathy and I and our kids were living in England at the time. And we we're spending a lot of money on all these crazy vacations every year. And Kathy said, hey, let's buy a house in the US, give the kids a sense of belonging. So we ended up buying something in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, because it was a relatively short flight from the UK to Florida. And the kids loved it. They had tennis camps and all kinds of stuff for them. And I, was working. So I only maybe got there maybe 10 weekends, maybe 1 week, 2 weeks of vacation a year. And at the time in Christ Fellowship, there was this great preacher who's retired now, Tom Mullins. He used to call Coach Tom. And he was a fantastic preacher. And I remember showing up at Christ Fellowship that day and, Tom is not speaking today. We have a guest speaker. And I was like, oh, man, I'm really looking forward to Tom speaking all the time because he's so dynamic and so, encouraging. And then, oh, who's this John Maxwell speaking? I don't know who he is. And then I heard John, and he just launched his book, and he said something so simple but so profound, my mind almost blew up. He said, yesterday's over, and don't dwell on it. There's nothing you can do about it. You can learn from it, but you can't change yesterday. And hey, guess what? By the way, tomorrow's overrated. So really, the only thing you got is today, and today matters. In fact, what you do today will determine what you will be working on tomorrow, because if you get today right, tomorrow you can go on to something bigger and better. But if you get today wrong, tomorrow you'll be kind of redoing today's mistakes. And it was just so simple, but so profound. I was like, man, this guy's onto something. I really enjoyed. And if you've ever heard John speak, in your head, you feel like you're having a dialogue with this guy, right? And he's on stage, he's speaking, but you're in the audience listening to John, and in your head, you're having a dialogue with him. He connects. Is a master connector with the audience. So I love John.
Really is. Yeah. He is a very prolific author. And one of the things I discovered, and this going to sound like a show plugging John Maxwell, and I'm not ashamed to do that. I mean, the guy's a definite thought leader in the field of leadership. When I heard that he had all his books out, and I don't know, I've lost count. I last 28 or 30 or 60, or I don't know. There's a lot. But what I was worried about when I started buying a couple and checking them out, some guys get on a thread of thought and they'll put out 6 or 8 books, but when you get them, you're hearing the same thing, just regurgitated with a little different spin. John's stuff doesn't do that. I mean, he weaves a thread through a lot of his books, and he'll make some references, but that's it. I mean, every book is a new thought, a new idea. And I think that's a gift when you can put out that much content and be able to do it that way. Not to digress, but I have my own John Maxwell meeting story. I met him at one of the IMTs, his big annual confab that he does there in Florida. You know, about 3,000 people gathered to participate for a 3-day workshop. And I'll say to the audience listening, if you've ever been invited but haven't pulled the trigger on doing that, it's worth your time. whether you drink the Kool-Aid or subscribe to anything, just those 3 days will be some level of life-changing for you, I promise. So anyway, I was there at the conference and I was excited to be there. We had gotten through about a day and a half, and during one of the breaks, I go tooling into the men's room, and lo and behold, who's there? There's John standing there.
What a place to meet him.
Which proves we're all human, right? And and we sit there and we have that awkward moment. Shake hands? No, we're not going to shake hands. And, hi, how are you? And we did talk, and so that's my John Maxwell story. But great guy, heart of gold, and really a passion to serve people and enrich lives. So it's worth the read, and follow his videos, find his video stuff. But enough of John. So let's get back to your story. Tom, tell us a little bit about your journey. I know it's full and rich. Give us the 30,000 foot view.
30,000 foot view. It's taken some time to get to where I am now, but I encourage every one of you listeners to answer these 3 questions for themselves. And my life's journey has been really just trying to find out what these 3 answers for myself were. In fact, it took a while just to understand why I asked these questions. But the first question every individual should be able to answer for themselves is who are you? And that really gets to your character. What are your values, and who are you as an individual? And the answer took a while for me to come to a realization of it, but I am a servant leader. That's who I describe myself. And then, the second question is, what are you passionate about? And I'm passionate about, making products better, making companies better, making people better, adding value to my customers. So it really is again, that servant mind leadership. It's not about me. It's about something much bigger than me, whether they be making a company better, making products better, or making people better. And the third question is, what are you good at? And I'm pretty good at mentoring, and I'm pretty good at leading. So once I got clarity on that, and if you imagine a Venn circle, where those 3 circles intersect, then you will lead a successful, or I would say, an accomplished life where you're living your calling. So, some people have jobs, some people have careers, and other people have callings. And it took me a while to figure out what my calling is, but answering those 3 questions helped me identify that calling. So I encourage everybody to do that. Early on in my career, I wasn't a servant leader. I was a self-centered leader. I was always a leader. So for some reason, there's whenever there's a leadership vacuum, and I'm sure if you've come across instances where you're in a situation and there's a lack of leadership there. And I just have a tendency to always dive in. I always take a leadership role. And but historically, when I was much younger, it was more for self-serving purpose rather than a servant leader purpose. So it took me a while to figure out it's not about myself, but it's about something much bigger than me. And once I understood that, then I became a much, much, much better leader.
I think that's powerful. So say those 3 questions again.
Who are you? What is your passion? And what are you good at?
Who are you? What is your passion? And what are you good at? Very, very impactful and profound questions. And I am frequently surprised as I engage with some of my leader clients that they've not yet done that work. They've not really asked that question. Either nobody's challenged them, or just somewhere, somehow in their environment that they grew up in, whether it be personal at home or in corporate settings, never really challenged to ask those questions. So A lot of them are driven by the work they do. Many of my listeners have heard this story, but pardon me if it's a repeat, but I'm going to just hit it quickly. In 2008, when we had the big financial crisis, I turned my side. I felt a calling in my community to start a nonprofit that was helping job seekers, people that had lost their jobs, and there was a gap in the geography around the Houston area. I'm in the far southwest, and so there was no such organization in my community. So I started one, kind of like you said, fill the gap, see a gap, fill the gap, and started. So we started coaching people about career transition, and inevitably I would ask somebody, and I was careful to word the question, tell me something about yourself. And what did people answer? I'm an engineer, I'm an accountant, I'm a finance guy, I'm a bookkeeper, and it's like, and I would shake my head and go, no, you haven't told me anything about who you are. And so that led a process that we coached people through to start first with identifying that purpose, that connection of who am I, why am I here, and where am I going?
Well,
And
especially, executives, they put so much of themselves into their job. And you're 100% right. You ask them, look, what is it that you do? Yeah, I'm an accountant, I'm an engineer. That's what you do. That's not who you are, but that's what you do. But many of us, including myself early on in my career, my identity was wrapped up in what I did, what my job was. That kind of distanced itself. And it really took me getting fired for the first time. And by the way, it's okay to get fired for your audience. Everybody, you read all these articles, this person is going on to bigger and better things or pursuing other career interests, whatever. All that means is a nice way of saying that, they didn't find a fit with the company. So in fact, look, in my generation, an individual probably had about 3 job changes or career changes in 10 years, and that was acceptable. Today, I mean, I see CVs and resumes that there's
18 months.
It's the average. So nothing to be ashamed about, somebody firing. It just means that, look, that relationship didn't work out, and some people quit, some people got fired. I mean, it doesn't matter. But again, that's just what you do. It's not who you are. And when you go into your next job, just kind of focus on who you are, not what you do.
Well, another way of looking at that, and I would agree with you totally. If you're in the leadership game and you've elevated into various rungs in the ladder of succession in whatever business you're in or business you created, even, it's inevitable. It comes with the territory. There's going to be some combination of events that's going to lead to somebody deciding you need to be the one going out the door, not everybody else. Steve Jobs got fired from the company he created. There was one round of that. Of course, he later was invited back, is all infamous. But I had to wrestle with that too. In my career, I'd strung together a 15-year career of successful promotion in the leadership chain at the bank I worked for. And then all of a sudden, one day, my boss walked in and said, "We're making changes. You're out." And I said, "What does that mean? What did I do?" And he said, "It's not about doing anything. We're just making changes. Here's options, blah, blah, blah. Here's what we're doing." And it's like, okay, well, and it was classic execution. They gave me notice on a Friday, and I had the weekend to ponder what I really wanted to do. And I spent first 24 hours being really angry about it. And then I'm a man of faith, so I turned my energy to prayer, and the answer that came back to me was, it's part of the ball game, dude. You go to bat, you're going to strike out every now and then. So this is your first. You had a good run, 15 years. This is the first time. It's not over. You got a lot of gas in the tank. Go make the best of whatever's there. So.
And look, through diversity comes opportunity, and that's what happened to me to that diversity. It took me kind of about 2 weeks, like it took you maybe 24 hours. It took me about 2 weeks to get my head wrapped around actually what happened and what am I going to do. And that's when I decided to ask myself those questions and really come to the realization that I should brand myself. And I, because I was in, I worked for consumer brand companies, so I knew a lot about branding and marketing. I said, okay, well, how am I going to market myself? How am I going to brand myself? So I started asking myself some of those, questions of who I am and what's my passion and what am I good at, which allowed me to really build a brand around myself and really launch my career after that one job and really accelerate getting into the C-suite. Maybe if that incident doesn't happen, maybe I never make it to the C-suite because it's more a conservative, job and, middle level management, maybe, higher level management, but maybe I never make it to the top. But what it allowed me and it forced me to take a look at myself and answer those questions and really brand myself and really launch what I would call my expat career.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. That personal branding. I do get asked that question from time to time, and as I referred to, part of my experience in career coaching with people led me to the very firm belief in helping people figure out that personal brand. And it's not limited to that point of transition where you have to change jobs, change companies, but there's even something to be said internal to a business you're in about identifying that brand and being able to have that discussion. So talk to us a little more about the elements of that as you processed it.
So look, let's take an example of two brands. They're both healthy brands. They're very different, right? They're both athletic companies. One is called Puma. The other one is called Nike. They're very different. They kind of make both athletic equipment, and you can't say one's more successful than the other. But what you can say is they stand for different things. So Nike's vision statement is we unleash human potential, and Puma's vision statement is we're the fastest brand on earth. And it kind of identifies who they are. So Puma's all about speed. So they, at one time they signed Usain Bolt, who was the fastest man on earth. They had Michael Schumacher, who was the fastest, Formula driver. So, their products are all about speed. So, the idea is when you buy a Puma product, you're going to be one of the, it's all going to be about speed. While, Nike takes a different approach. They have a much broader portfolio and it's about unleashing human potential. Not one answer is right. It's just, the answers for that particular company. So when you do some soul searching, you kind of look at yourself, okay, what am I about? Right. And when I looked at myself, I said, look, well, what am I good at? Well, I'm pretty good at starting up companies and turning companies around. If I looked at my career before that one change over the 15 years, about every 3 years, I was getting a promotion like yourself inside that one, company. And I always find myself, I was either starting something up or I was fixing something, all the jobs. And so I said, okay, well, I'm pretty good at starting stuff up. By that time, I started up one company, Greenfield. I turned around a couple of departments, and then I became, a startup turnaround specialist in emerging markets. And that's how I branded myself. Again, getting into that leadership flavor of it, where I said, okay, well, it's not just about that, but how do I do that? Well, I do that through servant leadership, right? And who do I do it for? Well, I do it for, either companies or for brands or et cetera. So that's how I branded myself. And that worked for me. That may not work for everybody. Not everybody may be a servant leader. Not everybody may be a turnaround specialist or a startup specialist. So that's how I branded myself, and it worked for me.
I like that. And again, I think in my experience, I see people that have kind of gotten on the train and just taken the ride, and maybe their choices about job opportunities doesn't have a particular pattern to it or particular consistency. It's just the next great opportunity that opens up and they jump at it. And on one hand, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think in the spirit of talking about leadership, I think there's a lot to be said for being able to be intentional about the direction you want to go and how you want to apply what feels like your natural or developed talents in that realm.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you one thing, Tom. A lot of debate in the certainly in academia. Is leadership born or bred?
Both. Look, there is, and I found this out the first time I took a Myers-Briggs test, right? I was an ESTJ, I think, or an ESTI. I'm not sure which one, but and I've taken Myers-Briggs, LSI, Strength Finders, DISC assessment, over throughout the years, and it's different wording, but it kind of pretty much comes down to the same thing of what my leadership style is. And when I first took that, they said, look, the majority of CEOs are ESTJs, right? So part of that is your DNA. But the good news is that you can learn and train yourself on leadership. I would say skills, right? We are all born with some gifts, and we should utilize those gifts. And those may not be leadership gifts, but if you have some form of leadership foundation, you can become through investing in yourself a much better leader over time. And academia doesn't do any good. I mean, academia is great at training people be good at what they do, not be good at who they are, right? And if you follow, kind of get back to those two questions we spoke about a few minutes ago, is who are you and what do you do? Academia is great at teaching you what you do. They're great at teaching you to become a good CPA, a good accountant, a good engineer, a good salesperson, a good marketer, et cetera.
Right.
The finding out about who you are really happens between the classes in a university. Finding out about your leadership role. That happens at are you a fraternity brother? Are you not only a member of a fraternity, but do you become the leader of the fraternity? Are you on a sports team? Are you a captain of your football team or your baseball team or your tennis team? Those are the intangibles where you learn about who you are. And academia is great at teaching you, at what you know. And academia should take it a lot more serious to teach you more about who you are, not just about what you do. And for example, you're starting to see classes in business about business integrity and stuff like that, but that's few or far in between.
Yeah, I've had the same observation, and in what I'll call a very unscientific survey that I've been collecting over the last couple of years, I do hear about at the university level programs, particularly the ones business oriented. They are doing things with having whole units, 3 hour block here, 3 hour block there on leadership, understanding leadership. And it actually, to the credit of those that are doing it, it goes beyond management 101. I mean, I was a business major in school, and I took probably a half dozen so-called management courses, and they were different levels and different things, but they weren't leadership. It by no means was it leadership based. And now, at least, some of those programs have been augmented, and they do open the can on the topic of leadership as a separate thing. Let me ask you, and with all your background and experience, how would you define the difference between management and leadership?
I'll just quote my friend and your friend, John, right? Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. It's a simple but provocative statement. And, management basically allows you to manage people and manage a process, versus leadership to say, okay, what's the direction? Where are we going as a company? What's our vision? What's our culture? Do I have the right set of individuals on my team? How do you form a highly functioning team? So it's really about making those tough decisions, rather than saying, oh, here's a process, it works well. Let's put Tom in charge of it and let him run it for the next 2 or 3 years, right? And I found that out, and there's actually a title, you can be a general manager or you could be a CEO. And those the way you approach those two positions is very different. As a general manager, you do certain things, but as a CEO, you have to do very different things.
Yeah, very good. Well, Tom, on that note, we're going to take a commercial break. It's time, and we're going to continue this right after this message.
Business is all about solving complex problems as fast as you can create them. Become the best problem solver by leading others to greatness too. And the first step is going to DougThorpe.com. Doug Thorpe is known globally for coaching entrepreneurs and business leaders, improving their performance and the work output of everyone surrounding them. You can find health, wealth, and happiness by learning to lead others to health, wealth, and happiness. Go to DougThorpe.com now and order Doug's books or hire him to coach your managers. That's DougThorpe.com.
All right, everyone, we're back. This is Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I'm your host, Doug Thorpe, and I'm talking with a new friend, Tom Kereszti. Tom is a proven CEO. We had a great talk in the first half about 3 key questions to be asking yourself, but now I want to turn. You see an image in the background. Tom, you wrote a book. Tell us a little bit about the motivation, the backstory on the creation of that book.
Two motivations. One is as a servant leader, I wanted to serve my community and give back to them. And I always found that, I read some great books, not just from John Maxwell, but from other, leaders, whether that may have been Giuliani, Jack Welch, or others. And I learned a lot through their books. So I wanted to give back to my community, to folks that I knew, that if they read my book, hopefully they can learn from my mistakes and from my wins as well. And oddly enough, the book came about because, as you know, Rodney, who's the public speaking coach for the John Maxwell Group, he says, look, when you get up on stage, you have to have personal stories. Because personal stories, A, you're not going to forget them. They're your stories, so how could you forget them? And B, they help you connect with the audience much better. So I just listed all these personal stories, and I said, my goodness, I have enough stories to write a book. And then I kind of said, all right, well, what are these stories all about?
What do they tell? Yeah.
What do they tell? And I kind of said, all right, well, here are some stories where things were working in my life, and here are some stories where things were not working so well in my life. So what did I have in common? And this, I came up with these 4 keys about culture, vision, strategic growth, and a diverse thinking theme. And, that's how I kind of structured the stories, and to kind of take some leadership principles in a culture. What is, leadership and culture, how did they work, and illustrated that, some of those points with stories. And vision, how do you form a vision, and what is the vision good for, and illustrated that with some personal stories, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's how the book came about. And, hopefully you enjoy the reading, and hopefully you learn from it.
That's great. That's really great. I'm curious, Tom, in your humble opinion, for the decades you were on the front and doing things, and maybe time since then, have things changed in the business world?
Well, look, a lot of stuff changed in the business world. You and I are not talking in person. We're in a Zoom call, different parts of the world. So many things changed in the world, but human beings are human beings. And leadership is leadership. And I don't care if you're the, X, Y, Z generation, or, baby boomers. You may have different shared values, but you still have shared values. You may be attracted to a different culture, but you will still be part of a culture. So technology changes a lot. Business models may change a lot. The way we market is very different. I mean, when I was in consumer goods back in the 90s and even early 2000s, we had this magic formula. We would do concepts, write a storyboard. After the storyboard, we did a commercial, and then after we tested it, we said we got the right commercial. We would have a formula that said, you have to get at least 65% reach of your customers, and they have to see that commercial at least 7 times. 65 reach, 7 frequency was the formula. Well, now marketing is totally different. You have, the way you market products now is through social influencers. My daughter's a social influencer on Instagram, and she markets products. And, we have direct marketing through all the social media, what's Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. You have all these platforms where, mass advertising on television is not really the way you do it anymore. It's very different. But guess what? Even on the direct advertisement, the way you reach people, the way you move their emotional strings to make a purchase hasn't really changed that much over the years.
Yeah. I work with, leaders at all different levels. And one of the common complaints I run into is it's true, and it is a real thing. People complain about the so-called millennial generation. And when I show up to do coaching, they'll ask me, what do I do about millennials? And I've found that I'm a bit of a contrarian on that topic. I say, you don't do anything different. They're people, you connect with them. There may be an age difference for sure, but it's ultimately no different than it was when you were 25 years old in the workplace and the CEO was 55. He had issues with you. And if you don't think that's true, I always point to the preface in the book Walden Pond by Henry David Thoreau. There's a block of text there that reads like the Millennial Manifesto today. I mean, you use the words, you use the thought, you read the spirit. It would be the Millennial Manifesto of today, but it was written in 1863. So I'm not in favor of giving a pass to a CEO who throws up his hands and says, I don't know what to do with a millennial. Not in favor of that at all.
No, look, we each individual, I don't care if they're millennial, XYZ, baby boomers, something's going to trigger to motivate them.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. So, but when you find that trigger of how do you motivate that individual, a 20, 21-year-old is going to work just as hard as a 40 or 50-year-old. But you have to, maybe their cause is very different. Maybe their cause is about, saving the environment. And then you're delivering products that, help save the environment. And that's what individual's cause is. Maybe the individual's cause is, saving, human trafficking of women. I don't know. Maybe it's one of those causes. Maybe it's a business cause, because every individual is different. But I think, I don't care what age they are, you will find the trigger to motivate an individual and really have that individual buy into you and buy into the cause, and then that individual will excel.
I would like to shift the table a little bit and put the focus a little more on the guy that's out there trying to create a privately owned business. And I do work with people trying to help owners move from what I call the founder mind to the CEO. So would like your thoughts on that, independent owner operator that's trying to build a business but hasn't thought about what it's going to take to really become the CEO of some kind of enterprise. And if a guy can't make that shift and pivot, the business is never going to grow any bigger than they are. It kind of like, back to John again, the lid is going to be there. And if you can't lift the lid, you're not going to keep advancing and growing.
Well, let me quote a different guy than John. This time, let me quote Stephen Covey. Start with the end in mind.
Right.
And many entrepreneurs kind of don't start with him. And I was just on a podcast yesterday, and it was really about mergers and acquisition topics. And when you start a business, kind of have a mindset to say, okay, how do I exit this business? Right? When do I want to exit it? At what stage? Is it always going to be a family-owned business, and do my kids want to take it over? Do I want to exit it by privately selling it to another company? Do I want to exit it by going public? Have kind of a realistic, goal for yourself to say, okay, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, how am I exiting this company. And then what does that look like? What does that vision look like? Because vision is not, Dave Martin says it the best. He says, do you have a cathedral vision? And by definition, cathedrals in Europe took hundreds of years to build. And the guy that designed it was the architect, never lived to see the end result. So do you have a cathedral vision for, your company? And what does that look like? What does that look like 25, 30 years in it? And then, what does your strategic plan look like to get to, each, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 5, year 8? How is your strategy building that growth to reach that and continue to put you on that path towards that vision? If you follow that, you'll quickly figure out that, look, as most entrepreneurs, they think they're superheroes. They think they can do everything. Just if I just had 25 hours in a day instead of 24, I'll make it go. And you just have to kind of take a step back and to say, look, what are my strengths? Where do I bring value to the equation, and who do I surround myself with on my inner circle, on my team, that will complement me of the things that I'm not good at, and how do I build that team, and how does that team deliver on that strategy towards that journey for the vision. So if you kind of go in that mindset, and that I don't want to plug the book for C-Suite and Beyond and the 4 keys of leadership success, but that's the 2 of the keys is vision and strategic growth, and how those 2 work in combination with each other. And again, how to build a diverse thinking team together, how to put a diverse thinking team together. So
I like that.
Those are all there. And if you're an entrepreneur, kind of lay that out before you ever get started. And also answer those 3 questions that I asked at the beginning of the show. What are you passionate about? What are you good at? You better be passionate about whatever you're starting up, and make sure that passion is sustainable over 3, 5, 10, 15 years down the road.
Well, I agree with you totally, Tom. That begin with the end in mind is a huge idea that many entrepreneurs don't take the time to start with. Any other elements around that theme, or others that the small business owner could use to make themselves more effective as a leader in their business?
Well, I think for a small business owner, one of the things that is very crucial to grow your business is, again, put together a diverse thinking team. In a larger organization, you may get away with not putting that together, but in a small organization, it's essential. Because mistakes really get amplified in a small organization. And many people, especially small organizational people, they tend to like to surround themselves with like individuals. People that think like them, people that act like them. They call it chemistry. But the danger for that is because if you all think alike and you all act alike, then you're going to have the same blind spots, and you're going to be open to making the same mistakes. So it's essential that a small business owner opens their thinking and make sure that they put together a diverse team. And when we talk about, I'm a big advocate of diversity, but not diversity of skin color or gender or something like that. Diversity of thought. Now, obviously, if you put a person from Brazil or Zimbabwe or Germany or Texas together in a room, they will view the world a little bit differently. So they'll have different ways of looking at it. So part of that is that. But it's more like, are you an analytical person, or are you a more touchy-feely, tree hugging person? Or are you a more an action, oriented decision-making individual? So you have to have that balance, because, for example, if you surround yourself with all decision-making, quick acting individuals, the high D's in the disc world, you may make a decision and implement the project, which is the wrong project. So have an analytical person on your team that can analyze it and say, let's look at it this way, let's look at it that way, because look, you may still, you're going to start off with the same problem. So you're going to have individuals in a room, but they will view that problem and the solution to that problem differently. And wouldn't it be wonderful to have 5, 6, 7 solutions in a room where you pick the right one out of that 6 or 7, rather than just having maybe 1 or 2 solutions in a room because you're all thinking alike to that same problem.
That's a really profound way of putting it. sometimes have talked with people when we try to look at an owner's organization. So the company's in flight. They've been in operation for a couple of years when I get called in to talk to them. And we start looking at the staffing, and the owner will be sitting there going, I'm just not happy. My team's just not hitting all the cylinders I want them to. And we start breaking down, well, who's this person? Who's that person? Where'd they come from? What do they know? And you're right. Inevitably, it's number one, it might be friends and family, and that's trouble that needs to be properly dealt with. Not saying it's unilaterally bad, but sometimes when we're talking about trying to grow to the next level, that person just doesn't have the capacity to go to that next level. And the tough call has to be made to redesign, re-engineer, and possibly move them out of the picture. But I like your idea about, really focusing on and searching for that diversity of thought to be able to make a better, more well-rounded assessment of opportunities that may be coming down the road.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Tom, I think we're about up on time here. This has been a joy for me. I certainly believe the listeners are going to enjoy it as well. How can people get a hold of you if they're interested in following up after the show's over?
Well, I'm Kereszti. I'm blessed with a unique last name. Everybody has difficulty pronouncing it, but the good news is if you look for Kereszti on the internet, you just Google my name, you'll find myself, my two daughters, and my sister. That's about it. So it's easy enough to find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest, place to start. You'll find also my website by Googling my last name. You can go to Amazon, Google my last name. You'll find the book C-Suite and Beyond. And I think Barnes & Noble and some other online retailers have it as well. So it's pretty easy to track down. I have a quote unquote open door policy. So just reach out to me, drop me a note and say, hey, Tom, I'd like to talk to you about something for 10 or 15 minutes. Just, get your idea on it. And I'm happy to jump on a call, invest 10, 15 minutes of my time to speak to you. Maybe I can help you. Maybe I can't. I don't know, but it's worth my 10 minutes and it's worth your 10 minutes to do so.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, Tom, again, thank you so much for taking time out to join us. And it's been a pleasure having you here with us.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, Doug.
Yeah, well, everyone, we're going to put a wrap on it now. I want to remind you, if you're listening on an audio channel, we do have the show over on video at YouTube with the channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I do want to announce the opening of a Facebook group that I've started up. It is the topic focus is founder to CEO. It's that concept that I'm touched on during the show here, that I know small business owners, if they truly want to grow and scale their business to some higher level, they're inevitably going to hit an invisible wall of the difference between their own understanding of management and what it's really going to take to be a leader of that enterprise. So take a look in the show notes here. You'll find a link to that group on Facebook. I invite you to hop over, join in, and join the discussion there. It's just launched, so for a time here, you're not going to see a lot of folks there, but please be an early adopter, join in and join the discussions we hope to have there, and there'll be other announcements about opportunities to share. But for now, we're going to say goodbye. Thank you for listening in. Hope to see you again real soon.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.